Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 33 of the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series right here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We cannot thank you enough for joining us here. This Monday evening, Tim Healey is our special guest. Who is Tim Healey, one might ask? Newsday's New York Mets beat writer for the Long Island and just New York Newsday. So, Tim, how are you? That was a botched open, but I do apologize. But really glad to have you here on Baseball Week. And how are things going with you during quarantine?
Things are going well. Thank you for having me. Quarantine-wise, it feels like, especially in a baseball sense, we've shifted from straight quarantine, where I really wasn't doing much of anything as far as leaving the house, to now going to the ballpark pretty much every day and watching the Mets in their spring training-like atmosphere as they, put on their camp and hope to get ready for the season.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy to think that summer camp is upon us now, and baseball is slowly coming back, and the Mets in a very good position to succeed here in this 60-game summer series, if you will, something that most likely we'll never see again in our lifetime. But who knows? There's right? Exactly. Fingers crossed. But really, for Mets fans, this is something big, because the designated hitter is now in effect in both leagues, the American and the National League. But we'll get to that in just a few moments. First, just want to say to everyone here, the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series, for those that are just tuning in for the first time, all of our guests, all 33 guests, including Tim, have ties to the East Coast. That's why Tim is here on the Eastern Observer right now. There we go. I made that. I put that right there. So, and also on top of it too, all 33 guests, we also want to know who they are behind or beyond the press box. So let's find out about Tim Healey here. So Tim, class of 2010, Danbury, Connecticut High School. Let's talk about that. So
we're going way back.
We're going way back. We're going way back. And as we actually, I'll give you the perfect quote from actually an NHL writer that we had on 2 weeks ago. Was he said, quote, "What is this, a day in the life?" I said, yeah, pretty much. That's exactly what it is, in addition to all of your now or present day things. So as we said just a couple of seconds ago, Danbury, Connecticut High School. You are a tri-state area native, if you will. So, now being here back on the Mets beat for Newsday, completely different coverage for you now. You started off back in high school. Were there any clubs or anything that you joined in order to get your writing skills enhanced? Did you want to be a writer all your life? Talk about your time from high school forward.
Sure. Well, growing up, I was always more of a math science kid, right? I think kids sort of, for better or for worse, maybe get divided into math science kids and then English history kids. And I was always math science. I hated English class. Sophomore year of high school, actually freshman year of high school, the end of freshman year, you're signing up for classes for sophomore year. And I'm flipping through the book of my options, and I noticed there's a journalism class, and it counts as an English class. So freshman Tim, 14 years old maybe, had the great idea of signing up for this journalism class and taking regular English. That way, if I take 2 English classes, I can take no English classes senior year, right? I'm going to game the system. Turns out, journalism was awesome, and I took journalism sophomore year, kept with it all the way through high school, took a combined 7 years of English classes, ran the high school newspaper, the Hatter's Herald, and that's sort of where I got my journalism start, my introduction and foundation to reporting and the journalism way of writing. And it was life-changing, obviously. Here I am, doing it for money.
Yeah, exactly. And you're doing what you love every single day. And a lot of people have said this, especially in our industry, is that, a lot of people, they sometimes say, well, we don't do it for the money because we all know that the pay isn't great. But we do it because we wake up every day and we love what we do. So I'm assuming that would be the line that, most of us, including yourself, would go down, where we wake up every day saying, well, we're almost like, this is a hobby for us.
Yeah. It's that's true for me, and it's true for basically everybody that I know. You know, I like journalism and I like sports, and I figured if I could combine those and make a career out of it, that's a good deal right there. I'm gonna go for that, and so far it's worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it. You said it throughout high school, and then even your time when you went further north into Beantown to Boston. And you were actually class of 2014. You were a Boston University Terrier. You
Yep.
graduated with a bachelor's in journalism, summa cum laude, which is fantastic as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really amazing. My personal self, I couldn't be able to do that, or would not be able to do that. But really good stuff there. And also, if I'm not mistaken, that's also the alma mater of your counterpart at MLB.com, Anthony DiComo, as well.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Anthony is my fellow BU grad. He's got a few years on me. Sometimes I remind him of that. There are a couple of us on the Mets beat, and there are a whole bunch of BU journalism folks spread throughout the sport writing, the baseball writing, and sports writing industry. So definitely proud to be a member of that club.
Yeah, and you were a part of the Society of Professional Journalists from May 2013 all the way to May 2014,
Yep.
Which was the time you graduated. Obviously, you were also the editor for the BU men's hockey. You were a beat writer for BU men's hockey, which is
Yep.
something else as well. And then you were also the executive producer of something called The Wire, which was a BU TV production. Boston University Television. So you were a part of the TV club as well.
Yeah, I bought into the idea that the more you can do, the more diverse your skill set, the better shot you have of getting a job somewhere, right? And that when you're in college, that's all you can really reasonably hope for is you get out of college and then somebody will hire you. So always a writer at heart, but I figured dabble on the TV side, learn a little something, and you never know what happens down the line. So that's what that was. The Wire was a every morning production, just quick hitting little news clips about what's going on campus and what's going on in the city of Boston. And that was a good time. I don't think about The Wire too much these days, but actually, when I do think of it, I think about how early I had to get up. I guess it trained me for spring training.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. But also, you were a part of the student newspaper as well. Tim,
Yeah.
it's almost like you were a sponge and you were just absorbing every little thing that to gain as much experience as possible at the university level. You were a part of the Daily Free Press. You were the associate sports editor, and you were the managing editor. And then eventually, as I said just earlier, you were a beat writer as well for the Daily Free Press, which is amazing. So you were able to dip your foot in 3 different places.
Sure, yeah, and those were you sort of climbed the ranks. Started in sports, and then I became managing editor, number 2 of the whole newspaper. And then for 3 seasons, again, writer at heart, focused on sports. I was fortunate to get on the beat of covering the BU men's hockey team. And BU is not a sports school. So it was sort of funny being a sports-minded person there. But hockey at BU is the biggest sport, the top beat for the newspaper, like football or basketball would be other places. So that was very, very important experience for me in terms of beat style type coverage, going to every game, home and away, dressing up, being professional, all those things. That was a really important training ground for me. And I like to think, held ourselves to a high standard for regular game coverage and some of the crazier stories that went on with the hockey team at BU.
Yeah, absolutely. So now now we're obviously going to go into the we'll call it the LinkedIn portion of while I was doing my homework on you.
Sure.
Going back in time, as we said, as we've been saying to every single guest on this podcast, or on this interview series. It's similar to The Last Dance. We go all the way from 1998 all the way back to 1984 in a quick 2 seconds, and then we'll eventually get back to 98, which would be, or in this instance, your time with the Mets.
Right.
But going back to 2012, Tim, May through August, you went home and to Danbury, Connecticut, and you were the sports intern at News Times. That is a newspaper, if I'm not mistaken. That would be the trajectory that you've continued to go down, and that's where you got it all started.
Yeah, that was fun. It was after my sophomore year of college, so I was halfway done, and I landed an internship at my hometown paper, the Danbury News Times, which is part of the Hearst chain. They own a bunch of newspapers in Connecticut and the country, and it was good. I got quite the breadth and depth of experience covering, an all-state javelin thrower and a wood bat summer collegiate league for baseball. Covered a lot of baseball. They knew I was a baseball guy. Covered some youth baseball high-end travel type tournaments, which was super different to be covering some kids that young. I sort of got a kick out of that, had some fun with that. And it was good. I think any aspiring sports writer or journalist of any sort would benefit from working for their hometown paper. I grew up reading the News Times, and I still remember the first byline that I had, front page of the sports section. My parents would get it delivered to their house, and I open it up, and there's my name on the paper I'd read all growing up, flipping to the sports page while I'm reading breakfast. It was really cool to see that and work there. It was a very important experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to be able to get your feet wet in the industry, and especially as a sophomore in college, is great too. And just to, again, you covered New England Collegiate Baseball League, the NECBL. You also covered New England Football, NEFL. But you also had written down there that you were the third sports writer. So regardless of what, and, obviously as we were, exchanging messages back and forth before this in our little pre-production, you had written down here on your LinkedIn that you were the third sports writers. But Tim, regardless of, you were the third, you were the second, the first, your name was still written in that paper. And, that's got to be quite a great feeling to see your name in a newspaper, especially one that you've read for most of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And third writer meaning, small local paper is not a big staff. So it was the sports editor, then the staff writer, and then me, the intern. So that's why that sort of environment is important, or was important for me as a journalist, because sure, you're just an intern, and to some places the intern goes and runs for coffee, right? That's the stereotype. But when you're working for a small local paper, you're going to get really good experience. And like you said, seeing my name in my hometown paper, there was nothing quite like it. It's fond memories for sure.
Yeah, and again, we're beginning to see, and not only we're beginning, but we've seen it for the last 2 years in our area. Your name all over Newsday. It's dipped in the sports section, little bits everywhere, talking about the Mets. But 2013, though, your next summer, which was your junior year of college, you stayed in the Boston area and you worked for WEEI Sports Radio. They are the sports, or the flagship station of the Boston Red Sox, and also, if I'm not mistaken, also the New England Patriots as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you were an intern there.
I was an intern. I was an intern on the website side. So I wasn't going on the radio or anything, but they had a pretty strong web writing presence in that market, and they still do. And that was another great experience, another very useful summer, because that is where I got my first experience covering Major League Baseball games. They, after a little while, trusted me a bit and invited me to assist on Red Sox coverage. So living in Boston for the summer, going to Fenway Park, you can't beat that when you're, a college kid who, is just trying to get their foot in the door pretty much anywhere. um, that fall when the summer ended, they kept me on as an intern, and I was able to cover the playoffs, the home games at Fenway too. So I was there through the end of the World Series, which just such an incredible experience. People can do this their whole lives without being able to cover the World Series and be there for some of the moments that I was there. And I never forget that I'm insanely lucky and fortunate to have done that, in my first summer around an MLB team. It was pretty good.
Yeah, not only that, but also such a storied franchise like the Boston Red Sox, to be covering a team like that, especially their World Series year, the year that they won, is absolutely amazing because, you could have been there during the dark days.
Yep.
Yeah, and you could be, you could be covering a team like how you were covering like the Marlins in their transition when they went from, to,
Right.
plummeting down. Right. So, but did you feel, and this is a question that I ask all writers that we have on our show is that when you're covering a specific team, we actually had Matt Gelb from The Athletic on our podcast about
Sure.
2.5 weeks ago. And we had asked him when he first started, he had started 2010, and his first playoff game was Doc Halliday's no-hitter against the Cincinnati Reds in the NLDS. So now I'm going to ask you this, because you're an intern and, with you being in the press box at Fenway Park and they're about to win the World Series, did you feel a little spoiled and say, okay, well, I don't know if I could ever write for a losing team?
Yeah. I did feel spoiled because it was insane to me that I was there. Every year on Facebook memories, they'll show you what you posted, and every, October 31st it is, because they won on the 30th.
Yep.
There, I posted a photo from on the field of a bunch of players holding the trophy, and that's every year that pops up. That's still crazy to me that I was able to experience that. And then what you were talking about as it's happening, how does it feel to be there, or what was the question?
Yeah, pretty much. How does it feel to cover a storied franchise like the Red Sox, but also
yes.
Yeah.
In that moment, I didn't really think about that. At that point, I'm still an intern. I still have a year to go in school. I would have loved to just had any job, never mind major professional sports beat job. So winning, losing, mediocre, in that moment, I'm not picky, and even now I'm not picky. I did get spoiled by that being my first experience. But you learn different things covering good teams and bad things, and both are useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to be, obviously the experience that has gotten you here, you now know what the winning and the losing is all about, but we'll get to that in just a few moments. But you then continued in Boston while you were still in Boston, 2011 to 14. During your whole time at BU, you were a part of the Boston Globe. You were we call that a correspondent sports hawk. Explain to us what a sports hawk is.
Sure. So the Boston Globe, and they still run it this way, they've done this for a long time, to cover high school sports, which, in the Boston suburbs and in the city, it's just a ton of schools, a ton of teams, a lot going on. So what they do is hire college kids to work part-time. And there were actually Jake Signer of the Associated Press, lives here in New York City, covers pretty much all sports. He was at BU, and he was a sports hawk, a night hawk at the Globe. And then when he graduated, he helped me get my foot in the door. And to start out, my job was going into the office, the Boston Globe office, then in Dorchester, a couple times a week, and essentially answering phones, taking scores, taking highlights, and inputting that into the system. So it was very basic, menial, entry-level work. And then on the flip side is you're sitting in the Boston Globe and you're contributing to the Boston Globe. And if you're a college kid, a journalism major, doing literally anything inside the Boston Globe office is just unreal. So the Nighthawk experience was great. I ended up working for the Globe in various capacities, on and off, depending on if I was in Boston or whatnot, until like probably early 2016, even beyond college. And you know, I I always take pride in my work, even the simplest thing, and taking those scores, getting these random high school athletes' names right, things like that. I always took pride in that. And I like to think that it helped me gain the trust of some of the bosses at the Globe. And eventually they gave me more and more responsibility, from answering phones with high school scores to actually going to a high school game, to then writing about the Boston Marathon, which is a big deal in Boston, to then, if it's a big step when, if they really trust you, you can, go cover a Celtics practice or a Bruins practice. And eventually they used me pretty regularly covering the Patriots, which was another critical experience and, another very important step in my career. So it all, really all happened thanks to Jake Signer of the Associated Press, to help me get my foot in the door there. And that was, to call it an important learning experience wouldn't even really do it justice, because it was really 4 or 5 learning experiences in stages over the course of those several years in college and beyond.
But it also shows that connections are the way in as well. It's not only the experience, it's also the connections as well. And we've heard that actually from, your guest number 33. We've heard that from, well, all 33, and it's the truth, because, everyone says, the only way that they get to where they get to is if, you meet someone along the way. There's, that small few, like a needle in the haystack, where you will find where, they did such an amazing job, but, you get that one person, like you said, at the Associated Press, that's going to just pull you right in and yank you in. And, you never look back, because then in 2014 also, you were a part of MLB Advanced Media, and you were an associate reporter covering, coincidentally, the New York Mets. So you got a taste of a little bit of losing in the beginning. But 2014 was the time, that you were a senior, and you wrote game previews remotely. That was something that we found on your LinkedIn as well. And just for all the viewers out there, we're not sponsored by LinkedIn. We're just saying that. Yeah. But you covered all Mets home games at Citi Field. So you moved down here to New York at the time after college?
No, I was, so that was an internship with MLB.com, and they have since killed the internship program, which still shocks me. But at the time, they hired one intern for every major league team, and your job is basically backup beat writer. So you mentioned Anthony DiComo earlier, my fellow BU grad. I was his intern, doing filling in for him on off days, or doing whatever he didn't want to do on a given day of work. I did not live in New York City. I commuted from Danbury, where my parents lived, and stayed with family on Long Island some of the time. So
smart man.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have those circumstances and a car available to me. You mentioned the game previews remotely, because the way it worked was, when the Mets were home, I went to the ballpark. And when the Mets were away, I did pretty much whatever needed to be done remotely at home or wherever I was. And that included, back then MLB.com did these basic game preview stories for every single game, which was a bit much. I think they figured that out eventually. But it was, similar to the year before when I was in Boston covering the Red Sox as an intern. It was just another really important experience. And I would not have gotten the MLB.com internship if I did not cover the Red Sox as an intern the year before. So you can kind of see how one thing leads to the other. Like going up a staircase, you can't really skip a stair. So yeah, that was another really fun summer. A little anxiety producing when you're fresh out of college and you're on the job search while you have the internship, and there's a lot of uncertainty in life sometimes, but it all figured itself out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just brought up, not being able to skip a stair or to jump over a certain stair because there might be something that we're missing. And one of which actually you had brought up earlier that you were a correspondent with the Boston Globe all the way until 2015-16, where you were covering the Patriots, the Red Sox, all the way until your time in Miami, which we'll get to in a second. But 2015-16, while you were with MLB Advanced Media or MLB.com, you were a writer for Sports on Earth and an editorial producer. Talk a little bit about that project for you.
Yeah, that was so that came out of the internship. So the MLB.com internship covering the Mets ended at the end of the season, and then I entered this. What did I call it? Some purgatory, something like professional purgatory or something to that effect, where I'm out of college, my internship is over, I'm freelancing when I can, but I'm also on the job hunt, and I desperately need a full-time job. I'm going a little crazy without a full-time job. And you know how it goes, the student loans and, trying to, figure out where to live, things like that. And then the folks at MLB.com by that point were running Sports on Earth, that's also now dead. So I keep leaving places that are now dead, I guess. I didn't realize that until now. But Sports on Earth was basically like an all sports website, and they needed a writer / producer / copy editor type person. And it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do career wise, but at that stage, I couldn't be picky. They were paying me decent money. It allowed me to move back to Boston, which further opened up more freelance work, especially with the Boston Globe. So that was it was good enough money to make it worthwhile, while staying on the more full-time job hunt, which it was from the time that I graduated to that time that I got a full-time job, 401k, health insurance, all that. It was 2 years. So a lot of different things filled those 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to be able to get that full-time job. And I can't even imagine going through 2 full years of, I mean, obviously I'm doing it now because I'm only a couple of years out of college myself. So, you think to yourself, wow, it's 2 years already, and you're, the acid's building in your stomach saying, okay, when am I going to be getting something? And all
Right.
of a sudden, then you got the Sun Sentinel, and this is where this came out, which we'll get to in just a few moments. But you then found a gig, 2016 to 2018, covering the Miami Marlins for the Sun Sentinel. So talk about how you landed that gig and how it was moving far away. And, obviously you're not moving all the way to Los Angeles, but Miami is no short drive either.
Yeah, I think what I learned when I moved to Miami is people say what's nice about Miami is that it's so close to the United States. Which I thought was a good joke because it felt like a different country, like in so many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, around the 2-year mark after graduation. I didn't have a full-time job, but was still working, 60, 70-hour weeks, piecing it together, paying the bills, freelancing, all that sorts of stuff. I applied for the job covering the Marlins with the South Florida Sun Sentinel around Valentine's Day.
Oh.
And they eventually offered me the job around Memorial Day. So it was a very long hiring process. Like most newspapers, it wasn't in great financial shape. So there was hiring freeze, stops and starts, looking for applicants, not looking for applicants. They eventually, David Seelig, the then sports editor there, who I'll always be grateful for taking a chance on me, eventually emailed, said he was interested in talking to me. We talked. He said, we want you to come down for an interview. And, you mentioned before I'm from the tri-state area, and that's true. Danbury, Connecticut's right on the New York border, but I consider myself a New Englander. Both are true. I'd never been in Florida in my entire life, and my first time there was flying down to Fort Lauderdale for the interview. So I saw palm trees and lizards running around on the sidewalk, and I thought, oh my gosh, what is going on in Florida?
You're not seeing your typical pigeons on Broadway or Fifth Avenue anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So I went down for the interview. I interviewed with a whole bunch of boss type people at the newspaper, and I left thinking they're not gonna give me this job. I knew one of the other candidates. He was a fellow MLB.com intern a couple of years prior and was already living in the area and was pretty good at his job and still is now. And I thought, why would they pick me when they have somebody who's basically the same right in their backyard already? And then they shocked me and picked me, and I accepted the job because to get a pro sports beat writing job when I was 24 was just insane. Just a best case scenario in a way that I can't even describe. So I wasn't crazy about moving to Florida because it was 1,500 miles from everyone and everything I ever knew. But there's no way I could turn that job. For the couple of weeks before I left Boston, before I moved to Florida, a couple times a day I said to myself, oh my God, I'm moving to Florida. This is really happening. And then it did. And then I covered the Marlins, and it was spectacular for all 19 months that I was on the beat.
Yeah, and to be able to do that, to cover a professional sports team, a Major League Baseball team, especially the Miami Marlins, who, at the time, you're covering a team that is in the transition of selling, if I'm not mistaken. That was right around the time where Derek Jeter was about to buy the Marlins from Jeffrey Loria.
Yeah.
And, obviously that was the time where we saw a lot of selling. We saw Marcell Ozuna be traded off to St. Louis. We saw, obviously, Giancarlo Stanton be traded up here to the Yankees.
Yeah.
Jose Fernandez, unfortunately, passing away, suddenly in a boating accident. So, things down there, your time, you were obviously able to see some winning with the Red Sox, but with the Marlins, it wasn't really that, unfortunately, for you. What was that like for you, though, covering a pro sports team to start at 24, but also, again, with that little spoiledness from the Red Sox? How did that translate over to Miami?
You're being very diplomatic and saying the Marlins stunk. So I got down there midway through the 2016 season, and 2 months to the day of me getting on the beat was when Jose Fernandez died, which was just, tragic on so many levels. On a personal level, on a baseball level, it changed everything for the Marlins. On the two other people he was with level, people remember Jose Fernandez. They don't really talk about the two guys who were on his boat that night and died with him. And honestly, I sit here now and I can't tell you their names. I don't remember them. And that's just the unfortunate reality of the world sometimes, I guess. But that was a heck of an initiation into how sports sometimes is not sports. I'll always remember Clark Spencer, who was on the beat, my chief rival, my chief competitor on the beat. He worked for the Miami Herald. We talked to Jose Fernandez 12 hours before he crashed his boat into the rocks. And it's just crazy to think, he talked that day about, he had one more start coming up in the season. And the day after the season ended, he was going to start his off-season workout routine, and he was going to go cycling, and he was just going to get after it. And he was so excited for that core the Marlins had, which they really did have. They were on the cusp of potential contention, where they were not rebuilding, but rebuilt. They were about to be there, and then he dies, and everything changed. That first offseason I lived in Florida is when Jeffrey Loria started selling the team. That was a disaster of a process.
To say the least, yeah.
Yeah, just because it took so long and there were so many different interested parties and groups of investors. I always get a kick out of it because at various points there was a Romney involved, a Bush involved, and a Kushner involved. And there were a lot of, as a sports writer, never mind a very young and inexperienced sports writer, I don't know anything about the world of, or have sources in the world of politics or, Wall Street or all these super rich and famous people looking at buying the Marlins. I didn't know anybody in there. So I got by with some help from some Sun Sentinel coworkers. And eventually, that summer, coming up on the 1 year of when I moved to Florida, the Marlins hosted the All-Star game, which was exciting. I had never previously been to an All-Star game. And then eventually Derek Jeter takes over the team as CEO along with Bruce Sherman, who was his moneyed partner and is the actual owner of the Marlins. And then you mentioned it, fire sale. D. Gordon goes first. Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees of all teams goes next. And then Marcell Ozuna by the end of the winter meetings. That was a heck of a week. And then in January, it was Christian Yelich, who obviously has been the best of those players since the trades. So I covered the transition in that first Derek Jeter offseason. And then in February 2018 is when I started talking to Newsday, and they ended up hiring me. So I caught the end of Jeffrey Loria, Jose Fernandez, Giancarlo Stanton's MVP year. That was the other thing that happened. Yes. I always forget that. Giancarlo Stanton hit 59 home runs. That was wild. And that's one, and that's also one. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tim. That's also one that's a like a very like one of those disclaimers like on the bottom there, that you don't see in that little fine print, because really, it matters, but at the same time, it's so little and so meaningless at the time when you didn't really do much. Right. On the season, except hit 59 home runs. Right. Yeah. So I caught the end of Jeffrey Loria and the beginning of Derek Jeter, and then got off the Marlins beat pretty much just in time. There are benefits to covering a losing team, and I told myself, okay, if I stick around and cover the beginning of this new Marlins era, that will be fun. But in hindsight, I'm glad I got the Newsday job. It was good for a lot of reasons. Yeah, I was going to say, not only getting that job, but, you're able to come home and you're able to be, near your family. You're able to be with your friends. And as you said earlier, everything that is up here in the tri-state area and in New England as well. So we're obviously glad to have you back here. So talk about how you got the Newsday job. That's I think the biggest thing, and where you are now. It was basically the same as the Marlins job in that I saw a job opening and applied, essentially, emailed the editors. This one came about because The Athletic came into existence. Yes. The Athletic hired a whole bunch of ball writers, including Mark Carrig, who covered the Mets for Newsday and who I thought at the time was the best person on the Mets beat. I have a lot of respect for Mark. He's great at his job, great writer, great reporter. And I figured, okay, Newsday's probably going to look for somebody a little more experienced than me, but let me throw my hat in. And that was my philosophy for years at that point. May as well apply. What's the worst that they can happen is nothing. They just won't respond to you. The best that can happen is they take a chance and want to hire you. And that ended up being that ended up happening. A little inside baseball for anybody who follows the Mets scene a little closer. Tim Britton, also of The Athletic, covers the Mets. The Newsday, before they talked to me, talked to him, and they offered him the job. But he turned them down because The Athletic also offered him the job. And that's what led Newsday to me. At the same time, Tim Britton was turning Newsday down. I was talking to the Houston Chronicle about covering the Astros. So Houston Chronicle offered me the Astros job. Then Newsday popped up, and I said, hey, Newsday, I actually have another beat writing job offer right now. that made them hurry up, and then they offered me the job, and it all worked. It was an insane week professionally. Job interviews don't really happen that often in life, and that week was just a week full of them, and it was a whirlwind that all ended up working out.
Yeah, I was going to say, and just, obviously just a few minutes ago, we were talking about how it was difficult to find that full-time job with the 401k, health insurance, etc.
Yeah.
And now you're getting jobs, job offers, multiple in the same week, as opposed to, a couple of years apart, which is amazing.
It was bizarre, and it'll I'm sure never happen again in my life, but the planets aligned that one week thanks to The Athletic.
Well, that's true. Well, listen, it's very possible. It definitely could happen, but and you obviously have some hockey in your blood because you covered BU, but what is the saying from the great Wayne Gretzky? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So that is a quote that I live by, and that's something that I hope that a lot of the viewers live by too, because you never know who would say yes to your email.
Absolutely.
So now let's before we get into your time as the Mets, you're good on time, yes, Tim?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Just making sure.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to bring this up because this is something that Tim wrote, and you can see on the bottom there, Tim Healey. It's called Hometown Hardball, and it's a minor league baseball road trip from the rocky shores of Maine to the bright lights of New York City. So this book was written while you were in Miami. So 2017 was when you wrote this. I actually took a peek at this book. I didn't read the whole thing yet, but this is definitely something that I'm going to do. But I saw a lot of the ballparks in here. Not only are amazing, I didn't know about. Talk about what led you to write Hometown Hardball, or to put pictures in here and speak about it.
Sure. That actually came up originally, and it the whole project took a while, but originally that was part of my pre-full-time job living in Boston working for a bunch of places phase. I got an out of the blue email from a guy who worked for the publisher and said, "Hey Tim, saw something about baseball that you wrote, and we have this idea for a book." And he explained the idea, and he said, "Do you know anybody who might be interested in writing it?" And we had a little bit of back and forth about what the idea looked like and how it took shape. And I said, actually, I'm interested in writing it.
Me, yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. And maybe that's what he was going for from the start, but that's where we ended up. The idea was, there are all these great minor league baseball stadiums in the Northeast, right? The New England states, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. There's something like 27 of them total. And I wanted to write a guide to those teams and those ballparks and tell readers what made each game or each ballpark or each team special. Every place has its own history, its own traditions, its own colorful backgrounds. You know what I mean? So that was a fun project. I visited a lot of the parks, but not all of them, because a little while after signing on to that book, I got the Marlins job and moved to Florida. So I visited a bunch before I moved, and then did a lot of the writing when I was physically in Florida. And then it came out in 2017. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, not only a lot of fun, but also to have a book with Tim Healey on the bottom of it. What does it feel like for you? Again, not only as we brought up earlier with the News Times back in your hometown Danbury, where your name is there, you're the third sports writer. But now let's up it a little bit, Tim. And you are an author. This is big stuff here. What goes through your mind when you see this book?
Well, you made the exact right comparison. The feeling of seeing your byline in print, except magnified by 100, to see that's a book that exists, and it has a spine and an ISBN number, and it's on, and people buy it. It was a really cool experience. Part of the reason I wanted to write it was to learn a little bit about the book writing process and do it once, so that and it's not a terribly big or long book like some of the other undertakings people have had. But I wanted to learn a little bit about it for down the line in case any other book-worthy topic comes to mind.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And again, for those that are just joining us here, Hometown Hardball, a minor league baseball road trip from the rocky shores of Maine to the bright lights of New York City by this man right here, Tim Healey, ladies and gentlemen. It is available anywhere. I bought it off Amazon. You can buy it Barnes & Noble, wherever you like. Hometown Hardball by Newsday, New York Mets beat writer Tim Healey. So really, really good stuff, Tim. I'm definitely going to keep reading that. Hopefully all of our viewers will be wise enough to purchase that in their quarantine chronicles, if you will. But now,
thank you very much.
Say that one more time.
Checks in the mail. Thank you very much.
There we go. Thanks, man. So now let's get to the meat and potatoes of your time here back home, or one of your homes here in New York City. Now there's a lot, and I actually brought up and I wrote down parentheses optional because it's definitely something, a powerful subject and something that we've heard. It was national news as well. We've heard it. So there was a confrontation between Jason Vargas, Mickey Callaway, a couple of years ago, and you were the reporter on the other end. So now, you have a lot of experience, Tim, covering a Marlins team, also as an intern, as a Red Sox, as a Red Sox reporter intern, if you will.
Sure.
Got to get my words right. There we go. So the moment that this happens, and I remember reading up on this, I remember hearing about this, and I remember saying, as an aspiring sports reporter, sportscaster, etc., myself saying, there was like, I was literally sounding like this, like I couldn't figure out what to say. It was appalling to me to see what was going on in that clubhouse. Now, as a reporter, and especially at a young age, like how you were at the time, Tim, what is it like? What are you going through when you hear this? Do you want to almost like crawl into the corner and never write another thing again?
Well, that's definitely not the case.
Good answer. I love that.
What I learned from that experience was what I knew was always true, but it's different when you live it. Sometimes when you're on a beat during rough times, like the Mets were in a rough stretch, the subject gets mad, and that's okay. I was always comfortable in my degree of professionalism, it just happened. It was basically wrong time, wrong place. Somebody got mad, another person got mad, and then it blew over in a couple of days, just like I expected, pretty much. In talking to sports reporters who have done this job longer than I've been alive, all of them have stories about their own versions of that. And pretty much like I experienced it, it always blows over. Sometimes you end up having better relationships with that person afterward. Not necessarily the case in my case. Both, Mickey Callaway and Jason Vargas aren't around the Mets anymore, so it doesn't really matter. But it was an unfortunate thing. And then it blew over like I expected, and it wasn't fun by any means. Definitely would have rather it not happened, but it did, and then it was over, and then everybody moved on with their lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, as I did say, it was obviously, and I do appreciate you touching upon it, because it is definitely, it's something, there's sometimes ups and downs, in one's career that is definitely, some might not want to talk about. And really, we do appreciate you, speaking
Sure.
up about it, even though it is 2 years old, and it's almost like, we're resurfacing, a dead horse that has been dead for 2 years. We don't really want to bring that up again, but again, a day in the life of Tim Healey, one to never forget. So, on a more positive note, as we have, we'll get into the last couple of innings of this interview here, Tim. Can't thank you enough for joining me here again, and
Sure.
and sticking around for the next few minutes. Being able to cover David Wright and his last game, September 29th, 2018, that is your first full year or first full season on the Mets beat for Newsday, and you are covering David Wright's last game. Talk about that feeling.
It was that was really cool. I, jumped on the Mets beat right at the end of David's career, and his well-chronicled injury struggles were very well chronicled. But everybody knows what David Wright means to the franchise, to the fan base. So when I think about my career so far and what might be to come, and I look back on some things and think, wow, I was there. I'm really lucky I was there. It was so cool to be able to cover that. David Wright's last game is definitely up there. Just the sort of the pageantry around it, the emotion around it. Those are the sorts of moments where when you're writing about it, you just want to do it justice. You know what I mean? Sometimes you end up holding the bat too tight and forcing things when you're trying to write if it's not coming naturally in the moment. But it's one I'll definitely remember, that slow walk off the field to the Captain America theme song, all of his teammates lining up, hugs one by one. It was certainly memorable, and I feel fortunate to have been there for it.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And then obviously some brighter times just last year when Pete Alonso hit 53 home runs and broke Aaron Judge's rookie record of 52. To be able to cover all of those home runs, or most of them, if you will, because I'm assuming you travel with the Newsday beat and you go with the Mets wherever they go. You're covering all of those games and seeing all 53 home runs. Talk about that experience.
Yeah, that was unreal. The past few years, I've covered several exceptional seasons. Stanton's MVP year, 2 DeGrom Cy Young years, and then the Alonso Rookie of the Year. And that was just, in its own way, maybe the most impressive, just because he was a rookie and he hit 53 home runs, which is just insane. But also to be around Pete Alonso and see how he conducted himself on and off the field, the way he says what he's thinking, and he's honest, which isn't always the case with athletes. A lot of times they put up a front. There isn't really a front with Pete Alonso, it seems. In getting to know his parents a little bit, they were at spring training and road games a lot, chit-chatting with them, just seeing their pride in their son. I've taken a lot of it's been a lot of fun to see that whole thing develop. And frankly, I'm looking forward to seeing what Pete Alonso's career becomes, because when David Wright retired, to round back to that subject, the question was, who's going to replace him? Who's going to be the face of the franchise, the team leader? Whether you're officially captain or not, there is a void there when David Wright retires. And David Wright and Pete Alonso never shared a uniform at the same time. Pete's first game was the first game after David's last game. But there are a lot of David Wright similarities there in Pete Alonso, and it wouldn't surprise me to see that continue for a long time.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool to see another C come back in the game of baseball. David Wright, I believe, was the last one. Obviously, Derek Jeter before that, and then David Wright, which is something that we might never see again. So now let's again in dark times like now during COVID-19 era, if you will, or quarantine chronicles, as we said earlier. You were down in Florida, I would assume, March 11th, 12th, the day that the sports world stopped turning, and you found out that spring training was officially canceled. What went through your mind, and what was your initial reaction when you heard, when you saw the signs on the doors and got the email or the phone call, etc.?
By the time baseball called it and said, okay, spring training is done, the regular season is delayed 2 weeks, it was inevitable, right? The NBA stuff had happened the night before. That was a Wednesday night. Thursday, the Mets were off, so I didn't have anywhere to be. But you keep an eye on Twitter, essentially, and you see all over the sports world, college basketball tournament, tournaments getting canceled, the NHL shutting down, and you figure it's only a matter of time until MLB does the same. And then they do, and you're right a little bit about it from a Mets perspective in my case. And then I stuck around a little while. I didn't know what was going to happen. The day before the shutdown, the questions posed to Mets players were, what do you think it would be like if there are maybe no fans in the stands on opening day? You know, we just did. I personally did not grasp the magnitude of what was about to happen. When they shut down spring training, delayed opening day by 2 weeks, I extended my hotel reservation in Port St. Lucie by 2 weeks, thinking I'll just wait this out, maybe go to the complex, talk to some players, even though there's nothing formal going on, not realizing that nothing was happening for a long time. So that lasted a few days. I stuck around in Florida for a few more days and then came back to New York. And by then, things were much worse in New York than Florida at that point. So then you get to New York and everything's closed, and it's like, all right, well, I guess I'm not really leaving the house too much these days. And then it very quickly became very serious.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just to see what obviously went on, and now it's happening down in Florida. So a quick reversal there. So we'll get into to just rapid fire here quickly. I got to ask you this. So favorite American League city and favorite National League city or park, if you will, or both.
Rapid fire. That's hard. City or ballpark?
Both.
Okay. Favorite National League city. DC. Love DC. Favorite National League ballpark? Pittsburgh.
Well, okay. Great ballpark. Yep.
Favorite American League city and ballpark? Fenway Park. Brings me right back to my college days. It's always fun to visit. The Mets go in a few weeks, as long as the season happens. I'm looking forward to that trip.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. I have to make it to Fenway one of these days when fans and or media are allowed back in there. That'll be pretty cool. Now, again, something that we need to look forward to in life. We've asked everybody, all 33 guests of ours, or 32 now, 33. We need something to look forward to other than finally getting outside and whatever. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Peppermint.
Peppermint, the first one to ever say peppermint on our show. Pretty good stuff. Now, what would also be your advice to a young aspiring journalist like yourself, who has been going through tough, difficult times, being told to stay inside? They can't go outside, and it's difficult to write. It's difficult to keep their mental state up to par. What would be your advice to them to try and stay on track?
My advice would be to, I'm no mental health expert, but obviously that's important. So I would say it's okay to go outside, to go for a walk, sit outside, something like that. I think that could be helpful. But as far as the job and maybe trying to find a job, working on stories, I would say just keep with it. Perseverance counts for a lot. You'd be amazed at what can happen if you just keep showing up. And right now, that doesn't mean physically, because we can't really show up places. But if you stay on stories, if you keep digging for good personal stories, the old cliche in journalism school is everybody has a story. And that's true. Sometimes it takes a little bit of digging, but everybody has something interesting to say, something interesting about them. So that's what I would tell, sports journalists or journalists out there right now trying to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. We'll see what the deal is. Obviously in just a few days, we're going to have a few exhibition games, Yankees, Mets. It's going to be also, I think, the Red Sox. You're saying earlier the Mets, the exhibition games are. I know the Yankees for sure.
Yeah.
Citi Field and at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, the Mets might have a third or they might not. It's going to be at least 2 against the Yankees, and we'll see what happens with the third.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be tons of fun as baseball is slowly coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Healey, Newsday's New York Mets beat reporter. Tim, cannot thank you enough for joining me here tonight, and I really hope that you stay safe and healthy when you do head back to the ballpark.
Happy to. Happy to join you and right back at you. Make sure you stay safe and all that good stuff.
Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate it. So just before we do go, ladies and gentlemen, join our friends Kurt, Kenny, Jim, and Petro on Wednesday night, July 15th, starting at 8 p.m. as they talk all things sports over at the K&K Sports Show, airing Wednesdays and Saturday evenings on our sister station, I-95 Sports Network. Ladies and gentlemen, one last time, that is Tim Healey. I'm Joey Jarzynka. For all of us at the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks, we'll see you next time.